Welcome back to the WinShape Marriage Podcast. We are wrapping up season 3 today by revisiting 8 of our favorite moments from this season. We have some amazing clips to share with you. So let's dive in. Rob, we have made it to the end of season 3 of the WinShape Marriage Podcast.
Yes, we have. And it's been a really great season. We've had so many incredible guests and really memorable conversations that we've both enjoyed.
So many guests, so many conversations. It's felt like a long season, a fruitful season, a productive season. I've enjoyed all of your conversations, listening to them. Of course, enjoyed the conversations I've got to have along the way with these marriage experts and people in the field and people on the WinShape Foundation team and WinShape Marriage team. So it's just been really fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there have been so many memorable moments that we've had throughout the season. And so today we thought it would be helpful to walk through some of our favorite moments from season 3 and just break down each one. Just talk through what the speaker was saying and why it really resonated with us. Yeah,
we did this last season. And you guys actually really loved this episode last season. So hopefully you enjoy this one just as much. But yeah, we thought we would take our top 8 moments. It was really hard to choose. I was like going back through all of them thinking, how am I going to pick? We're going to do 4 apiece. So I was like, how am I going to narrow this down to 4 moments? I mean, we could do our top 15 20 moments from season 3, but I think we landed on 8.
I think so. I might change mine before the end of the episode, but we'll see.
Okay, we'll just do something on the fly. So I guess I can kick us off with. So we'll do each moment. We'll kind of play the clip for you guys just to give you guys a refresher of what was said in that episode. If you missed it, you can go back and catch up. But just to give you a little snippet from that episode, and then we'll kind of break it down and talk through why it really landed with us. So
let's dive into the first clip.
Okay. I love the relief that provides, like you were saying, becoming one but not becoming the same. Because how much pressure you feel if you have to just turn around and be the same exact person that your spouse is, or that you expect for them to do the same for you. But the idea that you're one together, but that you can still kind of run your own races as well.
Yeah, I'm not holding up a mirror and saying, be me.
Right.
I'm holding up a trampoline and say, let's go launch you.
So Bob, Goff, I couldn't go through our list of our favorite moments and not include Bob Goff. I mean, we kicked off the season with him. It was a super fun episode.
Super fun.
And I was like, there has to be a clip from there or I know there was a clip from there that just like landed really well with me. And so I was like, this has to be included in my top moments. But what he said just there, it was the title of that whole entire episode. It kicked off the entire season. Be a trampoline in your marriage, not a mirror. And I will not forget that analogy.
Yeah. No, I mean, Bob was definitely a ball of energy, and it was amazing to kick off the season with him because it was such a fun episode. But when I think about that quote, it resonated with me because I know in marriage, it's so easy to think like my spouse needs to be like me, and I want to be like my spouse, you know? And so just thinking of what would a trampoline be like in a marriage context rather than a mirror. And so I thought that was really cool.
And I loved the kind of like the childlike analogy in that. I mean, I don't know the last time I've jumped on a trampoline, but I did jump on a trampoline a lot as a kid. As a kid, my neighbor had one. And so we would go over and jump on her trampoline. And it was so fun and energetic. But I do think about how like you could really launch yourself. And if you're jumping on there with someone else, like, you can really launch them off of that trampoline.
Yeah.
And if we had brought that same energy to our marriage too, where we were like, I am going to set out to launch my spouse. Like how much of a difference maker that could be.
Yeah. One of my favorite Bible verses, it's in Hebrews. It says, let us consider how we can spur one another on towards faith and good deeds. I think in marriage, the idea of considering is so important.
Yeah.
And thinking through like, how can I be intentional today to launch my spouse? Like Bob was saying, as a trampoline.
Yeah.
And so I think as spouses, that's one of our greatest opportunities, is to lean in and say, hey, my spouse is really struggling today, or hey, they're doing really great. How can I continue to help them have an even better day?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the cool positions that God puts us in. So leaning into that role is so powerful, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was one of my top moments. That's what we kicked it off with. Yeah. What did you have for one of your top moments?
Let's jump into my first clip.
Okay. So this is a little bit similar in the question. So it's a follow-up to the first one I just said, which is, I struggle to have more of myself to give at the end of the workday. Mm-hmm. What do you recommend for making sure I still have room for my spouse? Mm-hmm. Kind of similar to what you were saying about that priority, I imagine. But
yeah, well, when I was going through my counseling program on top of full-time WinShape role, I would a couple days a week I would have a full day at WinShape and then 4 hours of counseling. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I came home, definitely the tank was running on empty. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was two things. One, I think the idea of liturgies in our life. So liturgies are these structured practices of presence. We typically associate them with worship, but we can have liturgies to prompt us for all sorts of spaces. And so I had to develop a liturgy of commute home that released everything that I had been carrying through the day, and a space for me to ask and answer the question, what presence do I want to have when I get home? Because if I don't choose it, the posture that's going to choose me is not going to be a good one. That's and right. My family can tell you what that looks like. Yeah.
So I really love that clip. First of all, that whole episode with Jeremy and Genee was, outstanding.
Such a good
Talk
episode.
about, two people that have unlimited wisdom, it feels like. Yeah. But I think I really resonated with this clip from Jeremy, just talking about transitioning home from work. Mm-hmm. And it's this idea, the thing that really hit me was, you kind of can decide how you're going to show up at home. And if you don't decide for yourself, it's going to default to whatever the laziest version of yourself is, which is probably what he was saying, not great. Yeah. And you're kind of giving your family what's left over rather than giving your family your best. Yeah. And so I really love the idea that he had developed this rhythm of going through this liturgy in his head in the car on the way home, so that when he actually showed up, he was fully ready to serve as a husband and as a father. And so I think for me, as I am thinking how can I be a good husband, what are some rhythms or routines that I can set up for myself so that when I get home from work, or when my wife gets home from work, I can set that moment up to be, uplifting and successful for my family. So yeah,
you have a designated, if you are coming from an office or just a workplace that's outside of your home, you have a designated 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, whatever your commute is, to set yourself up for success. And I really loved that challenge of thinking, how can I best utilize that period of time to set myself up for success? Yep. And even thinking on days where if you have a flexible job where you are working from home some, or maybe your job is in the home, if there's a way you can set yourself up for success to transition from working to being with your family, in the evening, maybe you go on a 20-minute walk just around your block, or when your spouse gets home, they take, they've used their commute home, and so they take the kids for 10 or 15 minutes so you can have your own routine and rhythm to set yourself up for success if it's been a hard day at home. So I just loved the idea of trying to be super intentional to set yourself up for success. There's still a lot of time in the evening, and if you don't do that, that's a lot of time that can go by, not wasted, but not at your best self.
Yeah. I think about how we carry so much with us throughout the workday. Stressful moments, hard conversations, those boring, dull moments where you're just get me through this. Yeah. And so when you think about your example of working from home, you need to have some transition to say, I don't have to carry this anymore. I can put this away and show up for my marriage. And so like you were saying, going for a walk is the perfect example of, I'm going to give myself some space to decompress and then show up intentionally. So I really love that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a good episode.
Yes.
Lots of good wisdom in there, and definitely go back and check out that Q&A if you didn't get to the first time around.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so for my second clip, I chose kind of towards the beginning of this season, Ted Lowe, a guest favorite, one of our favorites.
100%.
Definitely love having him at WinShape Retreat and all the things. So he came on. It was a conversation with you and Ted. It was great, and I chose a clip from that episode. So let's listen to it.
Let's jump in. Now, you talked about this idea of things that change your marriage. One of your intentional thoughts you mentioned in the book is see the best in your spouse. And I think that's one of those that sounds great, and you want to put it on like a poster or something, like, I will see the best in my spouse.
Right, with a cat.
Yeah. And then in reality, it probably surfaces pretty differently than what you might expect. But talk about seeing the best.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best pieces of research that I found that was probably one of the biggest drivers to want to write the book is they found that the couples who rank themselves higher in their marriage satisfaction, they gave them this basically a spousal report card, and says rank your spouse on categories like compassion and generosity and kindness. And the common denominator of all these couples were the couples that ranked their spouse higher in every category than their spouse had ranked themselves. So if I rank Nancy a 7 in generosity or 8 in generosity, and she ranks herself a 6, that's a sign of a healthy marriage. And so it's basically a great marriage is made up of two people, and sometimes one person that can start this that says, I just wish you could see you like I see you. And I talked about this at a date night, and this lady comes up, and she said, I've been married 60 years, and the way my husband says it is, I wish you could see you through my eyes. And so it's this seeing the best. I'm going to give you what one researcher calls the most generous explanation for your behavior, and I'm going to believe it. And so you go, whoa, it feels like rose-colored glasses. It feels like a poster, like you were talking about earlier. But when you go to Philippians 4:8, I encourage couples to do this all the time. Philippians 4:8 gives us a filter for thinking that's very, very clear. And it starts with what is true. So if anybody is, God forbid, being physically or emotionally abused, here's what's true about that. That's not okay. That's got to stop. And that could be, in some situations, a deal killer, right? If that's true. But usually we don't live in that kind of extreme. And what's also true is there's some really great things about your spouse.
I could listen to that clip over and over and over again. It's so good. There are like 4 things in there that I just want to like plaster.
Yes, 100%.
Like everywhere and like never forget them. I think one thing that really stuck out to me, it was a theme throughout this whole episode, was he talked about scripture always confirms, like scripture and science are aligned.
Yep.
And what the research is saying and what neuroscience is saying is aligned with scripture. And I love that he gave us Philippians 4:8 as a filter, because it wasn't just this like catchy phrase, oh, see the best in my spouse, because Ted Lowe thinks I should see the best in my spouse. Yeah. It's see the best in my spouse because Philippians 4:8 says to think about things that are true. And how can I apply that filter to my spouse? It was just so good. This episode was so good.
Yeah. I mean, when he talks about seeing the best, I think there was one speaker that was talking about when your spouse wakes up in the morning, they're never setting out to make your day miserable. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times you can find yourself falling into a trap of like, oh, they said that one thing to intentionally get at me, or they did this that one way so they could specifically like rub me the wrong way or like make me annoyed or whatever it may be. But the truth is, most people don't wake up and say, I'm going to try and make my spouse's day terrible. Yeah. And so what Ted was mentioning here is just running through the Philippians 4:8 filter and saying, when there is something that maybe rubs you the wrong way, maybe something that your spouse does and you're like, wow, that kind of hurt me a little bit weird. Running it through that filter and saying, okay, is this actually something that I'm just telling myself some story, or is this actually true and noble and something that they actually meant? And so giving them just a super generous explanation to say like, okay, I don't actually think they set out to make me feel bad. I don't think they actually set out to make my day worse. And so where are they actually coming from? And so I think that's a really cool explanation for sure on Ted's part.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the quote from how he said it, and then another woman resonated with him too about, I wish you could see you the way I see you.
Yeah.
And that hits you because you don't always see yourself like in the best light at all.
Yeah.
And having the comfort and the confidence in knowing that your spouse is seeing you differently and more highly was just a really cool thing to consider.
No doubt.
So
I think we all kind of carried this sense of self, like an identity about ourselves that we think is a lot lower or worse than what it actually is. And so I think as spouses, our role is to remind our spouse just how valued and worthy and cared for they are in the eyes of the Lord. And so, like he was saying, I wish you could see you through how I can see you. The idea of just reminding your spouse, like, you are worthy, like, you are noble, like, you have value in this world. And so really a beautiful picture from Ted for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. You have another clip for us?
Yes, for sure. So this was one of my favorites from the season with Eric Wooten. We did an episode just diving deep into the world of conflict, answering some of our most commonly asked questions on conflict. And there were just so many good tidbits in the episode. And so let's dive into this one. All right, next question for you. What are your thoughts in conflict on addressing multiple issues at once? For example, I bring up an issue and my spouse uses it as an opportunity to bring up their own issue. And this is also a common thing in conflict where people will bring up like one thing that's bothering them, and then they'll say, oh, by the way, you're also doing this and this and this and this. And next thing you know, your spouse isn't just hearing like one thing they did wrong, but like 48 different things that they did wrong. What are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, my thoughts are no. Don't, yeah, right. Just don't. I mean, it's like the scenario you just gave. If you give me 17 things, that's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be able to respond in a good way. It sounded like some of that question was one spouse brings up a concern, and when they do, the other spouse is kind of like, oh, okay, if we're going to talk about this stuff, I got like 7 things I've been sitting
list.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, I always tell couples, if you made a choice to overlook those and not bring them up. So it's almost like you no longer get the opportunity to do it when your spouse finally brings things up, right? If it's a concern, you need to regularly bring it up. I think the other thing is we have a little saying that I pound all my marriage membership members on, literally probably at least twice a month we're talking about it. But the saying is this: validate now, truth later. Validate now, truth later. And so my belief is whoever brings a concern up to the other person first, their spouse's only job at that moment is to validate the concern that's been brought. Because we usually respond with our truth about the concern, and then it escalates, right? If my wife says, hey, I appreciate if you quit leaving the dishes in the sink and get them in the dishwasher. My truth may be she does the exact same thing. My truth may be I just picked up 4 of her dishes yesterday and didn't say anything, and now you're bringing this to me. But if I respond with any of that stuff, all I do is invalidate and dismiss her concern, and then we start escalating, right? So maybe it's not the dishes, but my truth is, well, you leave your clothes in the bathroom floor all the time. So now I'm bringing up the counter issues. And so that dynamic is, number one, common in just like every couple. We all do it. But 2, it's the one thing that prevents us from actually feeling heard, understood, and working on it. So my only job in that moment is to say, I hear you. I'll work on getting the dishes in the dishwasher. Yeah. Now, my truth's important, just not at that moment. So I need to come back maybe at a later time, or going back to what we've been talking about, if I already have a regular weekly check-in, I can wait till our next check-in, and then I can bring that back up and saying, hey, I heard you on Wednesday about the dishes. I'll work on that. But also, is frustrating because I feel like you do the same thing and then kind of hold me to a different standard. So I just think don't bring up other stuff. When a concern's brought up, your only job is to validate the concern, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah. And I almost empathize with a question because, I've probably earlier on in marriage, I was more in this bucket of not having a regular rhythm of checking in with your spouse. And so then when conflict does pop up, as a man, at least for me, I was like, oh, wait, I actually have things that I haven't thought about too. So let's use that as an opportunity, And so that's where that regular rhythm is so helpful because it's not just like, hey, I can only squeeze things in during like these random sporadic times of conflict that we have, but we actually can have like a regular cadence of checking in and making sure everything's okay. And so I feel like I have the space to then air some of those things that I might be keeping in my back pocket or not necessarily expressing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and it's easier, especially for the person, you get two spouses and one enjoys confrontation or problem solving or whatever they want to call it, and the other one's non-confrontational. It becomes hard to kind of be like, I don't know I don't want to ruin I like peace personally. I don't want to ruin a perfectly good Tuesday night bringing up an issue. So then at some point you're like, I don't know when a good time is. And then when my spouse starts getting on me, I'm like, oh, now we're already into it. This is as good a time as ever. And then again, we invalidate and dismiss the concern by bringing our counter concerns. So
yeah. And I think you bring up a good point of not wanting to ruin a Tuesday afternoon or a Tuesday night when you have like a small thing that's bothering you. And so then never addressing it. And I mean, that's where you lead to, you get 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the road, and all of a sudden you have this laundry list and you're dropping all of these things and saying, hey, you did this, you did this, you did this. And your spouse is probably sitting there thinking like, whoa, where did all this stuff come from? And it was just for you a moment of convenience of saying, hey, I don't want to ruin this evening. But like we were saying, a regular touch point definitely addresses that for sure.
And you're probably not going to bring it up until it's so frustrating you have to bring it up.
Yeah.
And then now we get back to the emotions and I'm probably not delivering it well. I'm not hearing, you got all kinds of other mess in the way. So.
Yeah. You're probably at the height of your emotion at that point of like, hey, this thing has been bothering me so much. I finally have to say something about it. So, yeah, that's a great point. So love that quote, talking about validate first and then respond. And so I think as guys in particular, you have such a heart to want to fix things. And I know we've talked about this in our episode with Ted Lowe as well. The idea of, I don't want you to fix this. I want you to feel this. And so when he was talking about, no, when somebody brings something to you, they just want to be heard in that moment. If you jump to saying, yes, you do that, but this, it's only going to get worse from there, And so I loved his thought on that. But then also he was talking a little bit about this idea of, one spouse brings up something that's bothering them and the other spouse is like, oh, wait, but you're bothering me in this too. And how do you handle the tension of like one spouse is one thing they want to address and the other spouse is another thing that they want to address. And so he just really eloquently said like, hey, the spouse that brings it up, address that point. Don't use it as a way of saying, I'm going to address this and we're going to address this, because next thing you know, you have this whole weight in this conflict of saying we have 48 things that we need to address in order for us to feel like we're getting to a good place. And so just saying, hey, whatever the thing was that started the conversation, lean into that, make sure they feel heard, validated, and then address the concern. And then once that is addressed, you can be in a safe space to move on to whatever other issues are bothering you or the other spouse wants to discuss. So
I think I love how he said we all do it. Like we all fall into this trap. I know we've fallen into this trap too, where it's like, but I have this thing that feels like so important to me, and it is, but it's almost like this cancel behavior where if you can't humble yourself enough in that moment to address your spouse, then you're immediately like you're hopping on the merry-go-round like right away, because then it's you and then you and then you and then you, and it's hard. Like we've done it. Like I get it. Like he said, we've all done it, and I'm like, yeah, we have. But if you can, it takes humility, and I think that's just a growth area that you have to be able to work on and say, am I humble enough to say, I haven't been humble enough in
Yes.
those moments
Yeah.
to validate your truth first, rather than monopolize it with my truth as well.
And that
it's just
humility
hard.
point is so important too, because I mean, when we are using, hey, you didn't do the dishes right. Oh, but you haven't put up the laundry. That's almost like a defense tactic to say like, okay, I don't want to address what's really going on with me, so I'm going to throw something back at you. And like you were saying, just be humble and say, you're right.
Yeah. I was challenged, and I was also sometimes with things like this, I do find it encouraging of like, okay, like we aren't the only ones. And then there's a good challenge in here. I mean, all of these clips that we chose, I think we chose them because we resonated with like, this is a really good challenge that if I could take this back to my marriage and apply this to my marriage, our marriage would just continue to soar and thrive and be like in a better spot than where it was. So I think that's what I loved about that. But yes, this was definitely good, definitely convicting. So
Yeah, for sure.
okay, so my next clip was something we did new this season. We had some marriage stories on our podcast, which was something, new and different
And powerful for sure.
yeah, very powerful. And so it was just nice to kind of and similar to what I was just saying related to Eric, it was nice to not just have a marriage expert on, so to speak, and hear a story and a testimony from a real couple and, just that's walking through marriage just the same as we are.
Yeah.
And so this was from our first story that we did at the beginning of season 3, a clip from the Robys. So let's listen to a clip from their story.
Let's check it out.
But just to tell you how unhealthy it was, okay, Lora took 3 months off from work. Her work was great, and said, hey, you just take the time. Abby's funeral was on a Tuesday. Wednesday night, I was on the sidelines coaching again. I'll never forget walking into the gym, and the parents were like, why are you even here? A lot of them had been to the funeral, and I was like, well, why would I not be here? And so we began to learn from a marriage standpoint, and we didn't learn the terminology until later through some stuff at WinShape, that there's that whole fight or flight. Lora wanted to fight, and I was ready to flight. Like I just wanted to go do my thing. I figured if I get back into my normalcy, and I would tell you that 6-month cycle is where we grew in our marriage of like, we finally looked at each other in May, and I was like, if we can make it through this, then we'll make it through anything. And we learned that for us, our kind of safe space is whenever we need to make a hard decision, and we've done this now, that's 22 years ago, and so we do, you'll hear a little bit more here in a minute, but we just, when we get to a place of where like we got to make some hard decisions or whatnot, we turn the cell phones off, we go away from somewhere. It could be to Savannah for 2 days. It's let's get away, just the two of us, and then let's talk through this, let's pray through this, and let's find a way. So I would say that coming out of that tragedy, outside of all the stuff we've mentioned, like from a marriage standpoint, like that was our defining moment of like, we're in this together, and the world is going to keep us busy. If we've got to make hard decisions, let's stop time for a moment, and the two of us connect and make sure that we do this together.
Their story was so powerful.
Indeed, yeah.
And I think what I resonated with, why I chose this clip out of all of it, although you really should just listen to
Please
all of
do.
it.
If you haven't listened to this episode, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, you should just listen to all of it. But this one particularly, it again was one of those moments of like, somebody else experiences this too. I just think we so often in marriage think like we have to be the only one. And that's what I love about WinShape Marriage Retreats. You get there and you realize like, oh, everyone else here like is married and has experienced things, not all the same things. And certainly like not their story. There's a lot of tragedy involved in their story. And so not everyone will resonate with that. But what most people can resonate with is just this idea of even how they responded in that. And he said that his wife was ready to fight and he was ready to flight, and figuring out how they responded differently. And then he went on and said it was a 6-month like cycle. And so recognizing that some things aren't solved over like a 24-hour period, a 48-hour period, and that it took them some time to really figure this out. And they kicked their heels in, like dug their heels in and said, we're going to do this together. And if we can make it through this, we'll make it through. And so that was just so inspiring. I don't know. I could talk about this one for far too long.
In the moment, he's like talking about, we both know we're committed to each other. So let's go away. Let's get with God and let's figure this thing out. It was just such a powerful moment. And I think through, you can read books about how to navigate hard seasons in marriage. You can talk about it. You can listen to speakers, but to hear another couple share their story of going through a tragic season in their marriage and how they found the confidence and the peace through it all is just like so inspiring.
Yes.
And there's so many takeaways that you can walk away and say, wow, they did that. It worked for them. If I'm in a similar season, maybe it'll work for us as well. Yeah. And I joke about this all the time on the podcast, but as couples, we have this tendency to think we are the couple going through something for the first time. Like nobody has experienced this before. Like, oh, we're having issues with parenting, or oh, we're having a hard time figuring out like work-life balance or whatever it may be. Right. Our situation is so unique. Nobody's ever gone through it before. Right. And then you go to WinShape and you hear tons and tons of couples that have been through your exact same story. And have walked through it and have figured out, hey, like this is how you can get through this season with grace and with care. And so for the Robys, just another example of they have gone through such a challenging season, but their story is one of hope that we can look back on and say, hey, if this couple can get through it, maybe we can as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, super powerful episode.
Yeah. So. All right, hopping over to my next clip that we had was your conversation that you had with Katie Bulmer, who absolutely wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Just talking about a lot about identity and comparison and what it means to be married in this day and age where you have social media and you can easily compare like, hey, that couple looks great. My marriage doesn't look great. Yeah. What's going on there? Yeah. And so this clip really resonated with me for sure.
So I want to go backwards just a second. You kind of touched on this a second ago, but some of those lies that you think that, social media is telling young couples. So I heard you say some things like, like if you're not happy, you can just like, maybe even get out. I mean, that's something that you see, or you don't like, if they're not loving you well, like you don't have to love them well, or things like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm curious. You're on this world. You're in this world with some of these younger women. And so what are some of the things you've already said, but what are some of those lies that you might be seeing circulating around?
I saw a TikTok just the other day. It was one of those that went viral, and it was just a young girl and a selfie, and it said, older women, tell me what's the best dating advice you've ever had, or maybe it was marriage advice, whatever. But the number one comment was, get out at the first sign of unhappiness, and tons of likes and tons of comments. And I was like, oh my word. That is what we're telling young women, or young men for that matter. And listen, I am not here to say that you should suffer through abuse, and there's certainly extreme circumstances, but by and large, we're giving up. We're not understanding how sacred and beautiful, and not only that, what is on the other side of fighting for a good marriage. I read in a book it was just an example. It was actually the 20-something telling the story of her parents. So the 20-something was talking about how her mom left her dad when he was at his lowest point. He was struggling financially. He was depressed. He was drinking. He was just in the lowest low, and he just couldn't get his stuff together. And she was like, whatever, I'm out. Some 10 to 15 years later, this young woman's in her 20s, and her dad is extremely successful, just killing it in all areas of life. And she says she felt like her mom left his worst years, but she missed his best years. And it was just such an interesting example of, what if that was a different script? What if it was that was terrible, but we struggled through it together? It was honey, I love you, but get yourself up. We're getting out of the bed today. We are applying for jobs. It is tough love. It is doing these walking through the mud together. No one likes it, but it's life, we all have to go through the junk. And I think that God gives us a gift in marriage to do it together, to have a helpmate. And sure, there might be some fighting and screaming and scratching through the mud of life, but it's real. Right now, we're kind of on this area of caring for our aging parents. We just moved my husband's mother closer to us, and it's a learning curve too. Like, what does this look like, and who does this and who does that? And it's a new thing, and there is no manual of exactly what it is we do here. But I think that it's part of life, right? We're figuring it out, and we're struggling, but it's such a journey, right? And I can see us like, oh my gosh, look how frustrating that was, but look how far we've come. And there's so many, there's a million examples of financial struggles that we had when we first started, when we first got married. I mean, there's so many things that I can look back and say, oh my gosh, like, look how we overcame that. And then the stories we can share, and then the memories. And I don't know, there's so many things I can imagine when we're in our 80s and be like, do you remember that time? And sharing, it really is like sharing that life together, and how sad it would be to be like, oh, this is a hard season, so I'm out. And then losing all of those memories and losing all of that. I don't know, that it's so much more than just, butterflies are great, like they are, but it's building a life together, and building memories, and building a foundation, and building, a generation of something for your children to look to. And what does this whole thing look like? Because again, we're not seeing it on TV shows. And so what does this whole thing look like, and how do we walk through life together? I don't know. It's just so much more than leave when you are the first sign of unhappiness.
Such a good quote. And I think, in today's day and age where it's so easy to be self-centered and to be selfish. And like she was saying, like on TikTok, people are commenting, hey, get out at the first sign of an unhappy marriage.
The first sign.
And so to think, okay, you can do that, but then you're just going to have a string of like, hey, things didn't go great, I'm out.
Yeah.
Hey, things didn't go great in this relationship, I'm out. And when you play that out like 10, 15, 20 years down the road, where does that leave you? Yeah. And the point that I really, really loved is when she said, what is on the other side of hard seasons in marriage? Like, what's on the other side of that? And when you think about, hey, if you and your spouse are butting heads and then you work through that, like, think about how much stronger your relationship is, knowing that, hey, we had this thing that we weren't in alignment on, but we figured out a way to find resolution in the midst of that, and the strength that comes through that. It's like, you go to the gym and you lift weights, and you have to lift heavier weights to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Yeah. And so in marriage, it's kind of the same thing. Like, each season that you go through that's challenging is only going to make you stronger. And so just leaning in and understanding that, yes, it's hard, but there's a lot of value that comes through hard seasons as well. So
absolutely. And she did clarify, and I always feel the need to say again, when she said, get out at the first sign of unhappiness, she wasn't saying if there's abuse taking place or if there's some like extreme circumstance. And even Ted mentioned that in the clip that we played just a few minutes ago in this episode of, extreme circumstances do exist, and you need to seek care for those situations. But the majority of us do not live in the extreme. And so if we take this mindset of getting out at the first sign of unhappiness, then you're going to end up, as you said, with just this long string of getting out at the first sign of unhappiness over and over and over again. Yeah. But if you're willing to put in the work and the time, then you can then you'll be able to sit on the other side and say, what was on the other side of this hard? Wow. Look at this, joy, and look at this, just beauty that has been created, out of fighting for this. And it's not always the most craziest circumstance. It might just be that you're just rubbing each other wrong and you can figure it out. But I don't know. It was super encouraging. I thought it was super encouraging and relatable, especially for our generation when, as you said at the beginning, we're seeing all these couples on social media, and we're like, It's the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And like, we're seeing it, and comparison is the thief of joy. And then we're comparing, and we're doing it like right before our eyes. So
yeah, it's so easy to say like, they don't seem to have these troubles or these problems, or they figured it out, but we can't. Yeah. So I need to get out. Yeah. Yeah. It's something wrong with my spouse. Yeah. But I mean, and I know we touched on this earlier, but there's going to be moments in life where you get knocked to the mat and you're going to need somebody to help pick you up. And that's kind of where your spouse exists in. Yeah. I mean, of course, like the Lord. Yeah. But a lot of ways your spouse kind of acts like, and Jeremy Marshall mentioned this in one of our episodes, Jesus with skin on. Yeah. Like an earthly, yes, like I am here body, to remind you of who you are in Christ. And so when Katie talks about, we're going through a hard season, let's say you lose a job, hey, like, it's okay, we can get through it. Like, come on, like, we can apply for jobs, we can figure this out, we can make a budget to work through the next couple of months. But just being that advocate, and going back to that verse I mentioned, considering how to spur your spouse on towards faith and good deeds. And so what does that look like? And when you come through that, just the strength that you develop in your marriage is really inspiring.
And it might not be necessarily a hard season that you're going through together. It might be an individual, like something that your spouse is dealing with, the loss of a job or the loss of a parent, or something that they're like personally experiencing, and you are by proximity to them, but you're able to kind of help pick up those pieces and carry that load for them. And so it might not always be that your marriage, so to speak, is going through something, as much as just you as an individual are navigating something challenging. And to lean on your spouse and have them to really to like fall into if you need to.
I think really about cool. Like the example of, let's say your spouse loses a parent or something, and they're in the season of like, how do I even figure this out? How do I cope with this? And you might have been close to your parent, but it's not going to hit you the same way that it hits them. Yeah. If you follow this idea of, I'm going to be selfish, you look at that example and you say, hey, my spouse is in this dark season, they're trying to figure this out. That's really inconvenient for me. I really need to go and find my best self. I need to live my best life. This is not my best life. See ya. Then you look back and you're like, okay, that was an opportunity where you as a spouse could have leaned in and said, it's a little bit inconvenient for me. No, it's not ideal that my spouse has to go through this period of grieving. How can I still show up and support them anyways, you know? And so, just leaning in and then learning that like, it is worth it. At the end of the day, like going through those hard seasons, even though it's harder, it's definitely worth it for sure. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep trucking along. What do we have next? Okay. So we've done several different like Q&As this season as well, which I've really enjoyed, just getting to ask questions that you guys have asked, which I think has been great. We're not even coming up with the questions on our own.
Makes it easy for us.
Yeah, it makes our job easier. And so we had Dr. Juli Slattery on, and we were answering, we literally titled that episode Answering Your Questions About Sex. So we went through and looked at all of our questions that come in related to sex and intimacy, and kind of lobbed them at her and let her, from her perspective and just researching this from a biblical perspective, really provide some insight and wisdom. And so I really loved her insight on this clip. So let's watch it. Okay. This was asked from an engaged couple. They said, how do you navigate preparing for marriage when you and your fiance have different levels of desire and or excitement for intimacy?
Yeah, I think some of it is recognizing that that's a very common kind of dynamic within marriage. I think the research would say that about 90% of couples have a significant difference in their desire for how often are we going to have sex, what do you enjoy in sex, and so preparing yourself for the fact that, hey, that's a normal barrier, and in our day and age, I think there's so much emphasis put on compatibility, and people are like, oh well, what if we're not compatible? And I would say, like, even if you're compatible at the beginning of your marriage, you're going to hit seasons where you're no longer compatible. You know, as you probably know, as a new mom, having kids changes everything. It changes your hormones, your energy level. There are illnesses that happen, and there's stress that happens, and there's just changes as we age. And so I think going in with the mindset that a good sex life is not that we're always on the same page, but that we learn to communicate about our priorities and our differences. And we also learn what it looks like to love unselfishly, what it looks like to understand your spouse and say, hey, I really want this to be a blessing in our marriage. And so if your spouse is the one that maybe has a desire for more frequent sex and intimacy, like, how do I really be mindful of that? And how can I really pursue that? And if your spouse is the one that has less of a desire, it's like, how can I cultivate romance? How can I cultivate like just emotional connection? How can I make sure I'm not demanding this from my spouse? Because what sometimes, I would say even often happens with this disconnect is you have one person always pursuing and the other one learns to avoid. And then the one who's avoiding is feeling like, I don't know if I even like this anymore, because it's starting to feel like an obligation. And the one who's pursuing all the time starts to feel rejected. Like, I don't even know if I want to pursue anymore because I hate that feeling of rejection. And so it really does take intentionality and communication and a heart to really want to work this out in order to find the right rhythm for each season.
Yeah. I think what I hear in what you're saying is kind of taking the pressure off of expecting that you will always be exactly having the same desire levels. Like, it's not always going to be exactly the same. In fact, it might not be. Like, it might be mismatched. And so the goal is not to work towards somehow getting those to be exactly the same, but to work towards healthier communication in communicating those desires for excitement, or desires and excitement for intimacy, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, but having that open and honest conversation around that. So the reason I really loved this one was it was asked from an engaged couple, as we said, as the question said. They were even just thinking about that they already are noticing that they have different desires for this and what will that look like. And she answered it so beautifully, but she really said, this isn't just something that happens for engaged couples that are anticipating having sex, but this is something that kind of goes across different seasons of your marriage. And 90%, I think she said, somewhere in there, of couples have different desires, like throughout their marriage. So I thought that, first of all, just that off the bat was super encouraging, because it didn't just apply to that one season. She was like, hey, no, this is actually something that could apply across the board, and you need to be able to pay attention to and look out for. So that first I loved. And then I really loved how she said kind of the fix to this, and kind of her answer to this question. It wasn't about trying to fix to get both of you to have the same desire level. Like, if there's a 1 to 10 scale, it's not about making sure both of you get to an 8 on the scale.
Yeah, we have to be on the same level.
Right.
Yeah.
It was that the fix to this, or how to approach this, is the communication around this, being able to be in a spot where it's vulnerable to communicate your desires and wants and needs. And that was more of her encouragement of how can we get on the same page in communicating around this really vulnerable topic, and less about how can we just both be like, yep, okay, 3 times sounds great, or whatever, whatever arbitrary number you have in your head.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think, sex and intimacy is a great example of this, but when you look at the biggest issues that couples experience in marriage, finances, dealing with in-laws, navigating like hard seasons, they're all really challenging, but it seems like the antidote to every one of those seasons is just better communication. And at our retreats, it's like, hey, we're going through this hard season. We are different pages of finances, and it's like, okay, talk about it, work through it, you know? And so when she talks about communication when it comes to sex and intimacy, like, yes, it's harder because it's a hyper personal thing to talk about your wants, needs, and desires.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, it's achievable.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that you can work through. And to your point of, and I think she mentioned this too, different seasons in marriage are going to look different. And so it's just a matter of, hey, we're going to have to communicate, not just early on, like this engaged couple isn't going to say, hey, we're going to solve this and then it's going to be fixed over the course of our
over the
relationship.
next 30 years.
Like, you're going to have to revisit the conversation on sex and intimacy over and over and over again, because you guys are going to change.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think about, I've been married for 4 years and I am not the same person I was 4 years ago.
Right. Right.
And that's in all aspects of marriage, you know? And so just the importance of continuing to have a conversation of, hey, where are you at? Where am I at? How can I best support you? How can we get to the same page? And if that looks like having to, like she was saying, lean into romance a little bit more, or maybe have a little bit better communication, whatever it may be, leaning into that, you know? So.
Yeah, I was super encouraged by this. And she mentioned it, you know, she alluded to it in talking to me in this episode, but similar to you, I've been married coming up on 8 years, or something like that. Close. 7, 8 years.
Who's keeping count?
Yeah. And I think about the different seasons. Like when Cody was in school and studying a lot, you know, our date nights looked different. Our intimacy looked different. Our connection looked different. And we had to figure out a rhythm for connecting in that season. Obviously, parenting, as she alluded to, way different. And we don't have teenagers or anything yet, and it will look different again. And so it's not just, yes, to your point, it's not just the physical act of sex. It's your intimacy, your connection, your ability to be able to just communicate about how that is ebbing and flowing will far surpass ever being able to, quote, get on the exact same page.
Yeah.
And I love, that's probably one of my favorite things in doing this podcast and having these different guests and experts on. They say they say the same things essentially.
It does sound very similar.
In like different ways. And like Eric Wooten said this in the conflict episode, it's like you might never agree on like the parenting style. Like you might agree to disagree on a particular one thing in your parenting, but your ability to communicate about that. And that's what she's saying here. Same thing with finances. Like you might come to a point where you say, I think we should never ever buy coffee out ever in our life. And the other person's like, I think I should be able to buy a coffee every single morning
Starbucks
on my drive in. And, you know, and you might always agree to disagree on that. Like, I don't share that perspective. But coming to the ability to communicate about it. So anyways, I love that you can take something like that, take a piece of wisdom, she said, and think, how can I apply this to my marriage, my season, whether it is in this vein of sex and intimacy or something else.
Yeah.
Altogether.
And I know we had an episode, we talked about the 6 different types of intimacy. When we were talking about the different seasons, it kind of made me think back to that too, of the idea of sex is only one small picture of the greater picture of what intimacy is.
Of all intimacy,
And so what we were saying is every season of marriage will look a little bit different.
Yeah.
And at the same point, your intimacy will look different in each stage as well. And so sex might be a huge part early on, and then maybe you have a baby and you need to lean more into emotional intimacy or creative intimacy.
Right.
You know, so there's like so many different avenues to get intimacy outside of just sex.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of this conversation too, is just like when you focus in on just the one small picture and say like we have different sex drives, you're missing the bigger picture of what it means to be in a deep relational intimacy with your spouse.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. So good. Okay.
All right. Hopping over to my very last clip here.
Oh, this is our last one.
Yep.
We're already at 8. Okay.
Yep. And so this was from our conversation with Genee Francis talking about marriage expectations. And it kind of aligns a lot with what we mentioned earlier with this Bob Goff clip that we played at the beginning. So would love to wrap it up with this one.
Okay, let's do it. Biggest thing that trips couples up.
Okay.
In just relation to this conversation. So it might be something you've already mentioned or said, but is there something that when it gets to this area that it really, you see, you're like, this keeps tripping couples up?
Absolutely. You know, this is a fun question, and The first thing that comes to mind is what I'll share. But I think one thing that trips people up is expecting you of others. Right? So expecting you, what is central to you, what is important to you, what is foundational to you, expecting that of others. And so I think accepting people for their experience and for where they are. And then again, it's not that we need to be the same, because we're not. But how do we align? And how do I position myself so that I don't expect you to show up as I would, or to think as I would, or to move as I would? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay. Say it one more time. Expecting you
of others.
Of others. Expecting you of others. Wow. Ooh, that'll really challenge you
right
there.
No, seriously. Because when you begin to break down, sometime when there's a conflict in this area and you really begin to break it down, what really it boils down to often is, well, I wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't think that way, or right? And so when you're dealing with a spouse and two people, it's not always about I. You got to be able to lean in and see the other side.
Yes.
And what do I need to accept about that person?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oof, that is good. That is really good.
So a great quote. And I feel like all of these different moments are kind of coming together as like one common theme of don't focus on you, don't be selfish, but instead think about like how you can come together and support your spouse. But I just love that quote of thinking, your spouse has a range of experiences, backgrounds, histories that you will never know. And you can hear stories and you can have some kind of a picture of like what they've walked through in life. But when they show up in your relationship, they carry so much stuff with them. And so to then expect that they will have a mirror image of your experiences and histories, and you will react to things in the same way and have the same triggers and have the same reactions to things, is just not realistic. And so it's coming to the table and saying, I recognize that my spouse is different and it's okay to be different. Like that is completely acceptable. How can we use our differences to grow together and then grow closer to the Lord as well? So
yeah, she went on to in this clip to say, like, to be cautious of considering the I. Well, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't think this way. I wouldn't react this way. It's like, right, because
it's
your spouse isn't you.
Yeah.
But it's just so easy. It's such an easy trap to fall into, and that's why I loved that you chose this one, and I loved ending with this one because it reminded me all the way back to the beginning of be a trampoline, not a mirror. But when you expect you of others, you are being a mirror. You're holding up the mirror and you're being like, why are they not thinking this thing?
Yeah.
Like, why are they just not doing this?
How can they not see it this way?
This is exactly what I would be doing.
Yeah.
And Bob said, he was like, be a trampoline. You're not trying to be a mirror. And then Genee said it so beautifully in a different way, don't expect you of others. And so I just love how we chose our four moments each to create these 8, and we each had a moment that we loved that is essentially saying the same thing.
It pointed back to the same thing. Yeah. The idea of you understand that you and your spouse are different. How can you consider those differences and then navigate yourself to best support your spouse in those differences? Yeah. And so, hey, I know they're going through a hard season right now. Hey, I know he's having a tough time at work. How can I not just understand how they're going to react and say like, okay, I understand that they're processing this differently than I am. But then how can I as a spouse move to support them and send them as a trampoline, like Bob was saying, so that they can be the healthiest version of themselves in marriage, for sure.
Yeah. So that is a wrap.
Yep.
That is a wrap on our top 8 moments from season 3. Of course, it's just our top 8 moments.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they were the top 8 moments. It's our favorites. But yeah, any thoughts as we kind of say goodbye to the 3rd season of the WinShape Marriage Podcast?
Yeah. I mean, I I've really enjoyed each one of these conversations, and I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this episode and found a clip or two that you really enjoyed, just go back and re-listen to it.
Yeah.
Whether it's a conversation with Eric Wooten on conflict and all of the different examples that we jump into, or something really fun and lighthearted like our conversation with Bob Goff.
Yeah.
There's just so much marriage wisdom to dive into and really learn it. And so I just would encourage you guys, if there's something that stuck out to you in this episode, go back and revisit it for sure.
I think that's great too, because the episodes live there. Like, they're not going away.
Yeah.
So you can definitely like re-listen to them. I mean, that was really fun for me. This was really fun for me, going back and re-listening to these episodes and being like, man, what really stuck out to me in this moment? And then maybe, you know, a couple months down the road, something else will stick out to me, or we'll be experiencing something new. And I'm like, that episode, I need to give that episode a re-listen again. So would definitely love for you guys to tune into all of the episodes from season 3, any of the ones that you missed along the way. And just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to all of these episodes. We're so grateful that you guys listen and watch each week. And we will be back.
We will be back.
A season 4. So we're excited for that.
Yep.
So,
stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. And thank you guys so much for listening to this season of the WinShape Marriage Podcast. We hope that conversation blesses your marriage. If you're loving the WinShape Marriage Podcast, will you please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed? You may be a faithful listener and not realized you aren't subscribed. It really helps us out. Also, if you've enjoyed these conversations and they've impacted your marriage, please rate and review this podcast. One listener said, "Thanks so much for pouring into couples with godly wisdom and practical equipping."